And it was just amazing. It was like somebody upstairs is sending me the right signals and the right information just in time. And so it was a wonderful witness for us. Now, Alvin was excited about another witness, and it was I humored him with getting this guy because it was the most engaged Alvin had been with the case. And this was a guy that we found on the internet, and he was in Georgia, so I thought he might be cheaper. And he was this strange guy who claimed to be a forensic pathologist. And Alvin was so excited about meeting him and so excited about showing him his house. And I thought, wow, this is unusual that Alvin is acting this way, but I'm going to go with it. So I got the guy, a retainer, and I actually met him in Atlanta. We went to the crime lab to look at what was left of Virginia, which was a bucket with throat and tongue, and that was it. And I was saying, "Where's her brain?" And they didn't save it. And there was plenty of room for them to save it in this bucket. And so I had me another issue then that they didn't save enough material of her for a full study, like they did to Flojo in California. So anyway, but I thought it odd on the way to the handwriting analyst's office that the pathologist wanted to ride along is he started asking my handwriting expert a lot of questions. And then we get back in the car and he goes, "Hey, if you need me to be a handwriting expert, I think I can handle that." And of course, he wanted more money. And I'm thinking, this does not sound right. I said, "No, no, no. I've got the guy. Don't worry. We're in good shape." Well, it ended up that that doctor was not even licensed to do anything that he was testifying about. And it was a total disaster. But Alvin liked the guy so much that the night before he went to dinner with us. And I didn't know what he had in store for us, but he said, "I want to take the doctor back to my house." And the doctor was afraid of Alvin. And he was like, held up his untucked shirt to show me that he was packing a weapon. And I was going like, "It's not necessary. It's not necessary." He was afraid of Alvin. Well, at some point in the evening, Alvin sees the weapon and he grabs his. And so I'm the only unarmed man in this creepy house with both of them waving their guns around, except Alvin's had like a dirt dauber's nest in the barrel, but so it would probably explode if he pulled the trigger. So in any event, that doctor was only in his house about 2 minutes. He wanted to get out. He was afraid. And he ended up blowing up and being completely destroyed by the DA in cross examination. So we were at a pretty low point, and we went to lunch. And Salesman Sam and Alvin had started developing a little following from one of his churches. So I said, "Y'all just sit together. I'll pick up the tab. I'm just going to sit over here and think." And after that lunch, we're walking back to the courthouse. And Alvin informs me that Jesus appeared to him during lunch and ordered him to testify. Well,
Oh boy.
that was Alvin's right. It was one that only Alvin could decide whether he testified or did not testify. His lawyer could not make that call. I just thought it was kind of settled, but I wasn't going to interfere with it. So I forgot to tell you the main part of the story, and I apologize. We started off the trial in a small windowless courtroom in an annex that was attached to the old courthouse by covered catwalk. And I asked the judge, I said, "Can't we do this in the large courtroom?" And he said, "Oh, nobody goes to trials anymore." But yet our courtroom was packed. A lot of them were county employees just curious about the freak show of Alvin Ridley's life. But I started realizing that some of them were truly friendly people who were really for Alvin, but they had never opened their mouths before the trial. And of course, I had family too that was coming by. And But Alvin, who insisted on keeping the originals of Virginia's writings, would unseal my envelopes. He and perhaps salesman Sam would go through them every night and make different calls on whether I should have this or that. One of the things of concern was Virginia's obsession with actor, writer, producer Ron Howard. She had like a big sister kind of affection for Ron Howard.
How interesting.
She wrote about him. Of course, he was Opie on Mayberry. He was Richie on Happy Days. He always think about it. He always played very wholesome kind of roles. And that was right up Virginia's alley, right with the Waltons and all those like very,
Sure.
wholesome shows.
Yeah.
But she wrote about him extensively. And Alvin and Salesman Sam thought it looked kind of bad that Virginia liked this other man. And so they kept me from using a lot of it. But I did get one piece into evidence. And it was where she wrote all over an article about Ron Howard and his new wife, Cheryl. And so I got to cross examine her sister on the fact that Virginia was into pop culture and seemed to be happy, in her writings. And Virginia's sister did me the favor of identifying her handwriting. So I didn't have to pay that last bill to the handwriting analyst to come to the truth, take the stand. So it was just all falling into place until the disaster of the bad witness that we hired. And that's when Jesus appeared to Alvin and told him he had to testify. And who am I to counter Jesus? But now that salesman Sam was already usurping my role as legal advisor, now I'm sitting third chair behind Jesus and salesman Sam in advice to Alvin. So I prepped him as much as I could, but Alvin had insisted on bringing these writings to court in these two old suitcases, these ancient, like 1960s suitcases, giant suitcases. And he would come to court and try to make himself look serious and busy. And he would open up the suitcases and hordes of cockroaches would come out.
Oh my goodness.
Because Alvin was reopening the envelopes and leaving them open in his house. And it was almost as if he was blowing a whistle and cockroaches march and get in the suitcases ready to deploy into the courtroom. And I was having to act like they weren't there. But if you watch Forensic Files, season 5, episode 9, the jurors were seeing them. And they did not know. One of them said what was going to come crawling out of that suitcase next.
Oh my goodness.
And so because over 3 days, we infested that courtroom with cockroaches and it was next to the judge's office, the judge called us up to the bench and said, Mr. Poston, we are going to have to, you're getting your wish. We're going to have to move this trial to the larger courtroom in the other building because I've got to fumigate this room. Well, the old courthouse was built in 1939, and it was a grander, bigger courtroom, a beautiful wood bench and bar and jury bar. But what was more important was I was about to reunite Virginia's writings with the last place she had ever been seen in public. September 15, 1970, the eviction trial. And it was eerie. I felt supercharged by this fact that I could now stand and say to the jurors, she stood right here and said, I want to be left alone. I married this man. We are one. And it was amazing what it did for me, that move. So thank you, cockroaches. Thank you, Jesus, in whatever order. And so it was an amazing thing. And and then of course, Alvin testifying I just let Alvin be Alvin because there was no room to make him anyone else. And I told there's a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He was very astute. He picked up on all the old civil litigation and that it all never went anywhere. And even the eviction trial ended before Alvin could testify. And he wrote in the paper, Alvin Ridley finally got to take the witness stand after 30 years of trying. And that was true. He got to take his witness stand, and of course, he mainly talked about all the civil litigation. And I had to prompt him to get him to talk about Virginia, but he was doing well. He had listened very carefully to the advice I did give him, which was, don't say anything good about yourself, only say facts. Because if you say something good about yourself, you're putting your character into evidence, and they can attack that with bad character evidence. And so he was doing very well. And of course, I didn't realize, or I forget, how literal he was. So when he was doing so well, I thought, I'm going to go for it. This is what a great ending. I said, Alvin, tell the jury what you've lost. And I wanted him to say, I expected him to say, the love of my life, my only friend. But Alvin kind of looks at me quizzically, and then he says, oh, I guess the funeral bill. He was being very literal, and I forgot. And and so, of course, I see the DA scribbling that answer down because I know we're going to hear it in his closing argument. And so it just played out beautifully. And after a 2-hour deliberation, Alvin Ridley was acquitted and the 3 felony counts that he was charged with. And we had this clerk of court that read out the verdicts. And regionally, he was called the voice of God because he had this booming baritone voice that he would call out. It seemed like an unending recitation of the indictment. And then he would boom out, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty on each charge. And I found myself hugging Alvin, the guy that I only touched a few weeks before when I grabbed his hands to pray with him about the use of Virginia's writings. And no longer did it bother me. I just felt like we had bonded in this battle. And there is a psychological term for it. It's called mission cohesion. And I just felt like he was my brother. And it was amazing because Alvin was still Alvin. And he and I went on, because it had such unusual aspects to the case. It was a very popular case. It was written about in not only the Atlanta paper, but the Washington Post did a huge article that began on the front page where they first kind of touched on the love story angle of Virginia and Alvin, this very, quiet couple minding their own business.
McCracken,
And
they ever have
yeah,
kids?
no, they never had children.
No children.
And that's, I gotta tell you, my doubts were still kind of lingering until the very last minute. There was one room that Alvin wouldn't let me in, and I could hear something in there, and I just thought, oh my God, they had a baby. and he's not telling me about it. And so the night before trial, I literally put my shoulder to the door and forced it open. And there was a flurry of activity, and it was chickens. Alvin, some of his chickens had frozen to death because he didn't have much of a barn, and he brought them to his mother's room on the inside of the house. And I guess he was a little ashamed of it, maybe, I don't know, but I just was so happy to see those chickens. But it also completely evaporated any doubt I had about his innocence.
And
so
where does the neurodivergency factor?
Well, 22 years later,
After the trial.
Alvin, 22 years after the trial, and of course it was not pressing anymore. because, Alvin was now just a friend. He and I had done our little tour of media, and then things kind of settled down. He started dating another woman who dyed his hair jet black, by the way, for a while because she wanted a younger man, he told me. And so I just kind of left him alone. And then one day he comes rushing into my office, and he had become a victim of a scam.
Oh no.
Where they had extorted like thousands of dollars from him. And so I realized that it was a common scam. I took him to AT&T and I said, change his number, handed his phone back. And what had happened, he still got just TV through the airwaves, that you remember before what we have now, wireless stuff, things went digital and you had to get a box and put it on the back of your standard set to get the digital signals through the air with broadcast signals. Well, Alvin had done that. Of course, he was very competent at TV stuff. And on it were these just incessant call. You can talk to a friend and meet a friend date lines. Well, these are all completely filled with scam artists. And Alvin got taken by one for thousands of dollars, but I got his phone kind of number changed and made him promise not to call the date line anymore. And then I said, Alvin, I'm about to go get a flu shot. Why don't you go with me and get your flu shot? And then I'll take you to lunch. And he said it was a pleasant, reunion. And I said, we should do this more often. Well, with Alvin, that meant every week at the same day and the same time. And so he started showing up at my office and I started taking him to lunch. And so for many, many years, we went to lunch together. And I would just kind of help him navigate the things that were going on. My new secretary was very good with him. She helped him as well. So we kind of were a team with him. And, different things like when he needed cataract surgery, we kind of arranged that and deal with that and help him with the eye drops and all that. But then he and I are doing a podcast up at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. We're doing it together. And it's really kind of a deep dive into the whole case. And it's now, featuring Alvin. And I suggested that some jurors for the podcaster to contact. And there was a juror who was a newspaper reporter that I couldn't believe she got on the trial. I just assumed that she would be disqualified because she had written about the case. But I ran out of strikes and she was next up and she got on the jury. And I'm thinking, oh, Lord, I don't know how this is going to work out. She's actually written about the case. But she ended up being a wonderful juror. She was, educated and could see through a lot of stuff. And she's the one that on Forensic Files talked about we didn't know what was going to coming out of those suitcases yet next. So she asked the podcaster to ask me. She had become a nurse in Alaska. And she said, is it possible Mr. Ridley is autistic? Well, I didn't know anything about autism in the 1990s. But now this is the 2020. And I'm thinking that tracks. I've since had autistic clients that I knew were autistic, and I'm thinking back, and everything tracked. So I asked Alvin. I said, Alvin, would you like to go to Atlanta and undergo a study to see if you may have autism? And he said, you reckon I can get more disability? And I said, maybe so. Let's try it. Let's give it a shot. And it turns out he was very much on the autism spectrum. And the first conversation I had with him, I apologized to him. I said, Alvin, you're a smart man. You and I were just not processing each other. And I think it was across the board. I wasn't processing him, and that was on me. and he wasn't processing me, and that was because of his condition. And it drew us closer, but what was amazing is it made him so much lighter. It just made him lighter and more open to people. And because he allowed me to tell about his diagnosis on social media, it caused the hearts of our community to completely change about him. Because most people have autism in their lives somehow, either somebody they care for or work with or look after or teach, or somebody in their immediate family, a nephew, niece, grandchild, child. And our lunches, which used to always be so pleasant because nobody would ever interrupt us when I was sitting with Alvin Ridley. Everybody was still afraid of him. Now we're getting interrupted and people are wanting to say hi to him and talk to him. And Alvin's still giving them the death stare at first, but then he started warming up and started, making comments. He was always awkward when a third party was with us because he didn't know exactly how to address them, but he got better. And when the book came out, he became a rock star. We launched it at the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library. He was my special guest, but he was sitting in the audience before Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporter Bill Torpy was my moderator. And they just had two chairs up there. And I asked the director of the Carter Center, I said, can you get a third chair up here? And he did. And I went down and I got Alvin and I helped him. Now Alvin was about to be 82. I helped him up to the platform in his new $400 suit that I bought him. He was looking sharp. And he proceeded to steal the show. I had never seen Alvin be so at ease in front of 300 people. And it was amazing. And a couple of days later in our hometown, we had the opening, and there were even more people, and he was even more at ease. And so he and I did quite a tour there for a while, and he had rules. He said he will go only 100 miles, and he will not get into an airplane and or ride a motorcycle. I said, okay, I think we can handle that. None of those things I will ask you to do. But, after we had a birthday party for him in Ringgold, hundreds of people showed up to it with their books, getting him to sign it. He just signed and would barely look up at them. And they were like, it was a cavalcade of, Alvin, it's one of our jurors. Alvin, it's your cousin. Alvin, it's Virginia's cousin. And I was thinking, God, he's miserable. But he was just so intensely focused on signing Alvin Ridley on these books. And then at the end, he started telling me what everybody was saying. And I had heard it because they were telling it to me, but he was saying, what do you think about that juror that said so and so? And so he was taking it all in. And then he said, I really like these book signings. So let's do more of them. But then he started looking a little more weary than usual. So I suggested we go to the VA hospital. And as it turned out, a decline in kidney function that we had been monitoring for really a couple of years was really taking a deep dive. And so he went into the hospital where he remained for a few weeks, but in good spirits. And they determined that perhaps with a procedure called a prostate ablation, they could, some of it was obstructive. So they thought if he could ease that, he could still have a lot of years left. And so we were all excited about that. And then I get a call at 2 a.m. by a hospitalist who said, I need you to make a decision. Mr. Ridley is having a moderate heart attack. If we address his heart, we will probably lose his kidneys. And I said, well, I don't know who told you I could make this call, but I'm heading there and we'll both talk to him. And I didn't know what to expect. When I got there, Alvin's sitting up in the bed. He's got his blazer on and he's handing out bookmarks about the books to the staff. And I said, well, you don't look like a guy having a moderate heart attack. And And she said, well, he's had more than a moderate amount of morphine. And, and so, I thought, well, this is just one of those moments that I always tried to seize upon with Alvin, a learning moment. And I said, Alvin, do you think Virginia and your mother and father are trying to call you home? And he immediately said, no, they want me to stay here with you.
Oh.
And it just touched my heart.
Oh.
And they got him kind of squared away. And on July 2nd of last year, it was kind of a slow week because of the 4th. And so I thought, I'm going to go up and spend the day with Alvin. Had no reason to think of anything other than just there was not a lot going on. And I thought I'll, spend some time with him. I took my time. I went to the hospital gift shop first, and I saw a little gorilla stuffed animal that reminded me of this faded out uh, group of stuffed animals that were in the front of his business for years that are all sun faded. And I just thought I'd have a fun with him and show him that I remembered that. And I got to the room and I could tell he was in distress again. So they started working on him and gave him morphine. And I thought, well, here's another approach I'll take on this conversation. I said, Alvin, I'm looking forward to meeting Virginia because I feel like I know her better than anybody but you, having read all of her writings and selecting out the few that we defended you with. And I said, I'm really looking forward to meeting her. Well, now that I'm going to be going to heaven, he's okay with talking about it. So he says, when we're up there, my daddy will take us fishing. They've got a river where you can catch 30 fish an hour. And I thought it's classic Alvin to put a number in a story because a lot of his stories had numbers. They kind of seem to be more credible that way, but there's a catch limit in heaven. I figured, 30 fish an hour, that's a lot, but it's still a limitation. So we had, I just had a pleasant little thought about that. And then he died. And he died right after this conversation about heaven and his dad taking us fishing there. And I just thanked God that I was there because I've had friends who, you know, died alone in the hospital, in the middle of the night with nobody there. And I just did not want that for him. And so I truly felt that I was supposed to be there right then and that he was not alone. One of the nurses had read the book and knew the stories, and she put her cell phone on his stomach, and it was playing Roberta Flack's The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, which Alvin had teared up during lunch one day when that story was in the background. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he said that was one of Virginia's favorite songs. And it's really a beautiful song. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
but I will.
It's haunting. It's hauntingly beautiful. And but it's classic Alvin. A couple of weeks later, he tears up again, and the song playing is Chubby Checker, The Twist. and so I said, Alvin, was this also one of Virginia's favorite songs? And he goes, no, that was Payne's favorite song. She was a dancer at Katie's 4 o'clock club. And, he's tearing up over everybody's favorite song at that point.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's like I said, this is more than just a case, and it's more than just a true crime story, but it is a true story. And I told it true because I still have to live here. and I don't think anybody was acting with bad motives in prosecuting Alvin. I think that's just the nature of humanity is we jump to conclusions and we don't like strange and we cast those people away off our islands all the time. And I think it's a cautionary tale because especially when I learned of Alvin's autism, because there are over 5 million people not yet diagnosed, and they could suffer the same misunderstanding and misjudgment that Alvin suffered.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
Thank you so very much for taking the time to, share his story with us. We truly appreciate it. It's been absolutely eye-opening.
Well, too, it just, at the end of the day, I do. I feel that fate. I think you two were brought together. I feel like Alvin had a friend. Well, I don't think. We know. He had a friend at the end of his days. He was able to I won't say enjoy, but he had somebody, and that was you. And you looked at him beyond just the case. You looked at him
As a
beyond
person.
everything.
Yeah, as a person and a human being.
Right. And you
Well,
I
well, I want to say that our community rallied. That Alvin's worst enemies in the trial turned out to also show love to him. The coroner who really spurred the investigation. This was her first murder trial. She was just seen as the bad guy in the case. We almost had to make her that. She actually Alvin started going to church where she went to church. And she called me. Of course, she didn't know a book was about to come out, but she called me and said, "Does Alvin have anywhere to go for Christmas lunch this year?" Well, I knew that he would probably be with me. So I said, "No, he doesn't have anywhere to go." So I just wanted him to go have somewhere else to go. And she invited him and he accepted. And I had to kind of draw him a map of where she lived. And then he calls me from the side of the road saying, "I think I missed it." So I had to leave my family anyway to go get Alvin to her house. And on the way in, I said, "Alvin, here's what you do in these social situations. You you stay about 90 minutes. And that'll give you time to eat, have fellowship with people, and then just kind of get out. And that way you're not overstaying your welcome." And Alvin, again, so literal. I went on home and ate, and I thought, well, I'm going to check on him. So I called, and he's out of breath, and he's saying, "It's 90 minutes. I'm out. I'm almost to my car." And he like took off running at the 90-minute mark, and to where the former coroner, because she no longer held that office, but she had risen to county commissioner by then. But she called me and she said, "Where did Alvin go? I was making his dessert." And I told her, I laughed and said, "Well, I told him 90 minutes and he apparently took it very literally." She went to his house, the house that she used to be so in fear of, to deliver his dessert. So it was a complete redemption for everybody in the book. And even my former foe, the congressman who later became our governor for 2 terms, I give him redemption in the book because he went on to pass some of the best legislation. And it was one of those only Nixon could go to China situations. Only a Republican could have pulled this off, to help people who are on unusually burdensome sentencing conditions and outrageously long periods of probation. He's helping them, you know, get back to a status in the community where they can work. And I said in my acknowledgments, because he did this, I never showed Alvin where he lived.
I love that. I
love
think that's so sweet.
That's awesome. Hey, McCracken, seeing how we've, touched on, the story, we've touched on his personal life, their marriage, your friendship, which I think is a huge part of this. Can you share with our listeners where they can purchase your book?
Yes, everywhere. Look for the kissing couple on the cover. Amazon, of course, it's one of its prime deals, and so it's down really low right now on Amazon, the hardcover.
And you have so many reviews. Like, your book is it no wonder it's on the charts. Like, there's a reason.
Well, I love telling this story. I told it last night at the opening of a new bookstore, and we had 50 people there. And I told them that this is something I do not mind at all. So I'm probably promoting more than most authors do, because it kind of keeps Alvin alive to tell these stories. And the people in the group had been to the earlier tellings, and they said, you told completely different stories this time. And that's because there's so many of them. And but I think the book captures, you know, the main gist, but it is more than just a true crime book, and it's not gory, unless you call rats and cockroaches gory. It is disturbing in the animal sense, but it's a wonderful story that I think is a cautionary tale about how we treat people and how we need to consider where that person is coming from and what limitations they may be dealing with before we accuse them or expect them to behave in typical ways.
Right, absolutely.
Thank you so much again. It was a pleasure getting to know you and speaking with you today.
No,
Thank you.
yeah.
I didn't mention my book's entire title, which is Zenith Man, Death, Love, and Redemption in a Georgia Courtroom. I say that because somebody took the title and took our story and changed their names and did a short fictionalized version. And she was an established author. And I was angry at first, but then I realized she was motivating me. And when the autism diagnosis, that sealed the deal for me. And everything else just flowed. I got an agent pretty quickly. I got a publisher pretty quickly, Kensington out of New York under their Citadel imprint. But it's a red and black book cover with a kissing couple on the cover. And that is actually Alvin and Virginia from a photo booth before they married at a little amusement park here in our town.
Well, I'm excited because you're going to share some photos with us, which I absolutely love. We'll make sure that we kind of attach those with the story as you listeners start to get the first episode of the series. It's just great. It's awesome to bring this story to our listeners. I know that we live in a small town. We have a lot in line with, Alvin and you, and just that kind of close relationship. Every town has an Alvin, and I say that with the utmost respect. And I think it's great, just what you did, just being a voice for him and going above and beyond. And I think things just kind of lined up so that the letters appeared, and and I just think God is good, and I think that all has something to do with it. We are going
Well,
to, in the description below, we're going to link so that to Amazon, everywhere our listeners can find your book, get their own copy. I'm sure you even have audiobook. We'll do all that. Yeah, and other than that, I really want to thank you. I mean, so gracious with your time. This will easily be a 5-part series for our listeners, and thank you very much.
well, listen. Thank you for letting me share this story. I think that my motivations were not always pure. I was pissed off at everybody who had kind of left me out in the dry. So that was my first motivation to help this guy. And I didn't care whether he was guilty or not. And then you just had to know Alvin, that he kind of grew on you. And it's to get us one last sense of my frustration. When I went to get him from home, now that I had access to his home for our first day of trial, he was moaning and would not open the door, and it was unlocked. So I went on in, and he was in the bed, covers up to his chin, his eyes closed tight like he was in pain. And I said, Alvin, we got to go. It's the first day of trial. And he said, Constitution says you don't have to go to trial if you're sick. And again, I've heard this so many times. I had the little paper Constitution in my coat pocket. I threw it at him. And then I just unleashed on him. The stress was so high for me. I cussed him out like nobody should be cussed out. And I immediately felt bad when he smiled and said, "You're talking to me just like my daddy used to." I felt terrible. But now I realize frustrations of a parent of a neurodivergent child.
Yeah.
Probably Alvin did get told off by his dad a few times, but I felt so badly that he had to reference that I got him, and he pulls the covers down. He's completely dressed for court. He's got a coat jacket on. He's got shoes on. He's completely dressed. And we go to court, and then he realizes he forgot his neck brace. And he starts telling me again, the Constitution says I don't have to be here if I'm not feeling good. I forgot my neck brace. You made me leave, and I forgot my neck brace. So I sent my secretary to the medical supply place, which is just down the street, Eddie Test Medical Supply. And I said, please get him just a soft neck brace, and at least it'll be clean and new and won't stink as bad. And she did. And as the jurors are walking into the courtroom for jury selection, they see a lawyer putting a soft neck brace on him. I look like the biggest scam car wreck lawyer ever in the world. But it kept my client in the courtroom, and I'm proud that I did it.
Damn, yes, you should be. I love that. Oh my God.
But I just want to thank everybody for first listening, and second reading the book, because there's so much I left out, particularly Alvin's cats. And I hope you will enjoy it. And please review. I'd like to ask this of both of you too.
Sure, absolutely.
Please review. And that's why I have so many reviews, because I think the story does engage people, but I think people are busy and they have to be asked. It's just like getting votes. You have to ask for that vote.
That's right.
And so I will ask you to please review, and hopefully this story, after 16 months, I'm still in the top 10 in 2 Amazon categories, books about persons with disabilities and the Kindle biographies and memoirs. So after 16 months, my publisher is starting to say words like evergreen. So I'm very excited about that, because that means more people are touched by Alvin's story.
100%. And my gosh, again, so honored that we can help tell it and continue this on, and Alvin's legacy. I mean, it's a great story all around. All the links will be in the bio.
Oh, and link the Apple Noble podcast too.
Okay.
And that way you'll hear about something I did after this case that was of note.
Very good. Very good. All right, McCracken. Hey, thank you very much. We will we'll stay in touch. We'll keep you updated on everything, and keep us posted here and there. We like to keep up with our guests, and thanks again. Appreciate everything.
Thank you both.
Hey,
take
care of yourself. Yep. Be well.